Alright, everyone asked for this video, so I'm going to show you how to recreate the Animal Crossing New Horizons logo. First thing you're going to want to do is grab your text tool, and you're going to want to download the Animal Crossing font. I'll put a link to it or something. It's called Think Heavy, and I'm going to choose this yellow color. That's the same one that they use. Here's the code for it. FBE 300. Anyway, so you can go ahead and type in your message, and this is slightly optional, but I'm gonna angle the text a little so that it looks wonky like they do in their logo. So I'm gonna right click on this. I'm gonna do rasterize type. I guess you could also individually type out each letter and then rotate it that way, but this is just what I'm doing. So I'm going to get my lasso tool and just rotate all the letters a little. Okay, great. Now that you have your text, double click on that layer and to open up the layer styles window, and then check bevel and emboss. And you're going to want to have the style set to inner bevel, technique chisel hard. And then some of these settings you might need to play with a little because it'll depend on your image size, but depth I have set to 32. Direction is going to be up, and then my size is 10. And then my angle's at 161, altitude's at 16, and then I have it just set to the default gloss contour. I did change the shadow color to this brown color, and then the opacity can just be at 100 for that. And then you're going to click drop shadow, and again you can kind of play around with this, whatever you think looks good. But these are my settings. You can just pause the screen and look at that if you want. But it's just your standard drop shadow. And then now we're going to create the back wood grain piece. So create a new layer underneath your text layer, and then I'm going to make a selection around all the text. So press Command or Control on your keyboard, and then click on the layer thumbnail, and that'll make a selection around that layer. And then go to Select, Modify, Expand. I'm going to do 50 pixels. This is kind of, again, depends on your image size. And because there's some of these weird gaps that I don't want, I'm going to get my lasso tool again, and I'm just going to have the mode set to add to selection so that it's adding to this existing selection and not making a new one. And I'm just going to make it so that this is one whole piece. And then I'm going to add the roof shape that they have in their logo, and I'm just gonna change to the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm just gonna draw out a trapezoid shape at the top. That looks about right. And I'm just gonna go ahead and fill that in with with the paint bucket tool. I'm just gonna fill it in black. It doesn't matter what color you use. And they also kind of have that gear shape at the top, so you can do this a few ways. I'll just get the elliptical marquee tool out, and I'm just gonna, you can press shift while you're clicking and dragging to make a perfect circle. I'm just gonna eyeball this. That looks fine. And then I'm gonna get the paint bucket tool, and I'm gonna fill it in again. But when you're filling it in with the paint bucket tool, make sure you double click so that everything gets filled in and there's not that weird line. And to make the little gear shapes, I'm just gonna again use the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm just gonna draw out those little gear shapes. You can be more precise with this if you want. And again, make sure your selection mode is on add to selection. And then I'm going to fill that in with my paint bucket tool again. And there you go. We have the back shape, and now we have to make some wood grain. So make another new layer on top of that. And I'm going to use this brown color. The code for it is AD780B. And I'm just going to fill in the whole background with that. And then I'm going to go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. And about 11 is fine. And have it set on Gaussian. Is that how you pronounce it? I never know. And then check monochromatic. And then go to Filter, Render Clouds. And then we're going to go to Edit, Fade Clouds. And we're just going to drop that down to about 20-ish, 22. And then go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I have it set to 1.5. And then we're going to go to Filter, Distort Wave. And again, like with everything, you can kind of play around with this, but I have it set to 610 for number of generators. And then wavelength is minimum is 51, max is 345. Amplitude, it's set to 24 and then 102. And then scale, horizontal is 22% and the vertical is 1%. But yeah, there's definitely some leeway. So you can see in this preview window kind of what it'll look like if you change stuff. Like I can already go ahead and change some stuff around if I wanted to. But click OK. And then we sort of have some wood grain texture going. And then go to Filter, Liquify. And I'm just going to add some knots into this. So I'm going to go onto the Twirl Clockwise tool. And I'm just going to kind of mess around with that until it kind of gives me a knot. And you can also use the other liquify tools to just kind of mess with the texture more if you want, like so. And then click OK. And then to make the wood grain a little bit more pronounced if you want, you can go ahead and duplicate this layer by pressing Command or Control J, and then going to Image, Adjustments, Desaturate, and then set that layer mode to Soft Light. And that just kind of brings out the wood grain a little and just makes it a little more noticeable. I'm actually going to lower the opacity of that a little bit to about maybe 40-ish. And then I'm going to go ahead and select both of these layers by pressing Shift and selecting both, and I'm just going to merge them together by pressing Command E. And then we can also clipping mask this to the shape layer we created. And to make a clipping mask, you just press Alt, and then you just kind of hover your cursor between the two layers, and then it will clip the top layer to that one. And since I don't really need to preserve my clipping mask, I'm just going to also go ahead and merge those. And then now we're going to add a bevel effect to this shape. So double click on that to bring up the layer styles. And we're going to set the shadow to black. And we're going to lower the opacity to maybe around 50. And I'm going to change the size. Everything else can pretty much stay the same as before. I'm just going to change the size to about 25-ish. And I'm realizing now, here I can see that I left a little spot when I filled it in my shape. There must have been like a hole there, so it's making it look like there's something carved out. And I'm just gonna like paint that in to fix that. I don't know what that's about. Okay. So whatever. Let's pretend that did not happen. Okay, we're almost there. We're almost done. So now there's that little clock shape that we can make. And to do that, we're going to go to our ellipse tool. I'm going to set the color to black. And again, you can press shift and drag to make a perfect circle. And make sure your fill is on black and no stroke. And I'm just going to eyeball that and move it to where I think it should be. And then I'm going to set that to soft light. And then double click on that, and we're going to do some more bevel embossing. So this time, have the direction set on down. And size can be like 6. And then click OK. So then you have this shape. I'm going to make a new layer on top of it. And for some reason, I'm going to use the elliptical marquee tool now instead of the ellipse tool, just because I feel like it. There's a lot of ways you can make a circle in Photoshop. So fill that in with white. And then I'm just going to about center it on that ellipse. You can actually, I guess we could actually center it. You could actually center them to each other if you select both of the layers, and then using the move tool, you press these two buttons that align horizontal centers and align vertical centers, and then that circle will actually be centered inside. So I'm going to just lower the opacity of that to about 30-ish. And I don't feel like making the actual clock design in here, but basically you can just like erase from that layer and put in your design. So we're basically there. Now we're just going to make the little New Horizons tag. So you're going to make a new layer, and then I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm just going to draw out roughly the shape of that tag. And I can go in and edit these points by pressing Command and clicking on the different nodes. And I can do that to kind of make it a little more accurate. Okay. And then I'm going to select this blue color, the code for it, 76C0DF. And then I'm going to right click and do fill path. And then I'm just going to make sure it's set to foreground color. And then there we go. And now I'm just going to use the eraser tool to erase out the little hole that's in the tag. And I'm just going to do that. I'm going to move that up a little. Okay. And now I'm going to make the design on the inside. So I'm going to make another new layer on top of this price tag, and I'm going to press Command and click on the layer thumbnail to make a selection around that. And I'm going to do select, modify, contract. We're going to contract it by 10 pixels. And then I'm just going to choose a kind of creamy off-white color. And I'm going to fill it in. And now I'm just going to go in And I'm going to freehand it. You can do this however you want, but there's just kind of that like, oops. There's that like ripple effect. And I am too lazy to really make it accurate, so I'm just going to use the eraser and erase it by hand. You could use the pen tool, I guess, if you wanted it to be very accurate, or something. So there we have that. And now back on the base blue layer, I'm going to choose a green color. This is the specific one I'm using. And I'm just going to, again, freehand draw in the like, oops, the like palm tree island thing that they have. I'm not trying to be super accurate here, so you can kind of spend as long as you want on that. Okay. You can draw on the palm tree. I am too lazy to do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and merge both the bottom and the top price tag layers so that they're one layer. Double click on that. I'm going to click bevel and emboss again. And I'm going to set the size to pretty small. And then I'm just going to soften it a little too. So those are my settings. Okay, so then you're going to click texture. And for this pattern, you're just going to go click on this gear icon and then click grayscale paper. And then you're going to select the stationary one. It's the second to last one. And it will add, actually, not the stationary one. I think this one looks better. Pebbled. And I'm just going to set the depth to 215. Then I'm going to click OK. And that adds a little bit of a paper texture to it. And then you can add text onto here too. When I add text, oop, that's really big. I just add a really slight bevel to the text. So if we were to do that, you can just add a really slight bevel. And now you make it a little softer. And there you go. That's the Animal Crossing logo.